You are on mute now, Deepti. Deepti, you're on mute. We cannot hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. What I was saying that it seems like a lazy Sunday morning for people. They're getting up slowly and then joining. So we'll wait for another couple of minutes. Meanwhile, I've requested team to send a reminder again so that the reminder hits their mailboxes and then they remember to join that they had signed up for this conference.
I think that's okay. Sometimes it's an opportunity for us to have a better discussion as a smaller group.
That's also true.
Yeah. So while we wait for everyone to join, we can take a few minutes. I'd love to know if everyone wants to share what they do and what about the session interested them. You can use the chat box if you want, or you can unmute yourself and share it verbally.
Yeah, so let's try to make this conversational and interactive since we have lesser people. So anyone? Preeti, I see you switch on the camera. Gaurav is also here. Good to see you, Gaurav.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Deepti. I don't know if you can hear me, and can I go ahead?
We can, loud and clear.
All right, so I'm Preeti, and I am a new PMI member, and I am preparing for my PMI exam. Right now, I'm in India at my parental house. But since I recently became a PMI member, I wanted to see what all activities there are and how the best way to make use of PMI membership while I'm preparing for the PMI exam.
Right. Good to know that. Gaurav, I already know, but we would like you to talk about yourself, Gaurav.
Sure. Thank you, Deepti, and hi, Rupal. Good to see you. Though we are connected on LinkedIn, but it's a good opportunity to talk to you. So I believe my expectation from today's session is basically more around learning how the hybrid work and the changes which we have seen over the last 2-3 years has actually impacted the project performance, the team performance. I think you would be covering that since you are basically expert in that. And other than that, I basically volunteer for Project Management Institute and as well as PMO Global Alliance, which is now part of PMI. So good to see you and looking forward to this session.
Amazing. We have one more person who responded in the chat, which somehow has disappeared for me. Hold on. This is interesting. I can now open the chat. Yes. Vineet is new to PMI and he's just getting the hang of it. All right. Well, welcome to PMI, Vineet.
All right. So we see a lot of new members as well. And I see now people have started joining in. So meanwhile, Rupal, let's get started. So today's topic is very, very interesting. And this is our first webinar of Learning by 4 series. We've had 3 series so far and they have been hit. And you've seen Rupal already in Learning by 3 series wherein she shared some insights from the PMI research. And those were very, very interesting insights. And today also, Rupal is here with us, sharing some insights from PMI research on breaking free from Office Centric Models. So what is that research and what Rupal has come up with? I'll leave up to Rupal. But before I hand over the mic to her, quick introduction. So Rupal is a global thought leadership specialist with Project Management Institute. She brings in, I'm sorry, there's a typo. This is 8+ years of experience, not 78. She's not that old. In breaking down factors that impact the everyday lives of professionals and businesses. And she's created research intensive thought leadership content for multiple international brand names, including Gartner. So here we all welcome Rupal to this session, and we are eagerly waiting to hear from her about the insights that she's going to share with all of us. So over to you, Rupal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepthi. I am gonna share my screen now. Let me know if everyone can see it. I'm hoping you can.
Yeah, we can.
All right. So as we talked about Office Centric models and moving past it, but before we do that, I want to share a few things. First of all, I want to make sure everyone knows that the views that I share are my own, but the data I share is that of PMI. Anything that I share here is copyright of PMI USA, and it cannot be used in any promotional or otherwise material without attributing it to PMI. So if you want to share something, go ahead, but you should make sure you attribute the resources to PMI before you do so. And all of this has been curated specially for PMI North India chapters Learning Byte 4.0 series. So you will see some of the data in here that no one else has seen, and it's not available online. All right. So, moving past Office Centric models.
ওয়েবিনার আছে, তোমাকে এখনই সব কথা জিজ্ঞেস করতে হবে? শুনছো এখানে কেউ কথা বলছে?
I see someone's not on mute, so requesting everyone to please be on mute when they're not talking. Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you. No worries. So before we dive into that, like, Deepthi talked about my experience. She's covered most of it, but I just want to talk a little bit about the team that I work for and what we do at PMI. I work for what is a thought leadership team, and we report into the CEO at PMI, and our job is essentially to make sure we know what is the latest in the profession, what is happening, what are the changes, how are people responding to it. And the idea is to empower the community to navigate the projects and the business landscape successfully so that they are ready to deal with the changes that are happening. They're not caught by surprise with respect to anything, that they know how to deal with things, that they can kind of also contribute to shaping the narrative of project management. A little bit about the research before I go into the findings. So this research is called Pulse of the Profession. It is an annual research study we do every year, which usually is across 3,000 to 4,000 people. For this study, this was about 2,600 people. And then we do a qualitative element of the study where we dive into the findings from the research in in-depth interviews with people from the community. So for this particular study, we did 15 interviews with experts ranging from professors of project management to PMO leaders to team members and program managers, who are individual contributors as well as leading their own teams. So want to make sure we have a bit of an idea of where the findings are coming from. But the goal for this year for us was to understand three things. First, we wanted to explore how different ways of working are being adopted and what their impact on project performance is. So I want to take a minute to note that ways of working also mean project management approaches. It also means your location. So it could be both of the things that we are referring to together, or it could be any one of them singly, and you will see that throughout the findings. The second thing we really wanted to investigate was how organizations are preparing for office-centric models and hybrid workplaces and what that really means. Do we still need to come into the office every day? Well, you'll find out if the answer is a yes or a no. And the third thing we want to figure out with the research is what are other factors that are driving project management, that are driving project performance, what is contributing towards the evolution of project performance. At this point, I want to also take a minute to point out to everyone that the chat box is your window of communication. Please use it liberally. Anything you want to share, any comments, any questions, please put it in there. We do intend to take the 10 minutes of the session at the end to go through any questions that anyone has. Now, is everyone ready to find out what we have? So the first finding we want to talk about is project management approaches. People here talk about agile, people talk about predictive, people talk about hybrid. You have all these certifications out there, but what is the point of any of them? Are they important? Are they not important? What is going on? And does it matter what project management approach do you use? Is there one best approach out there? All of those questions we're going to answer in the next few minutes. Before we do that, I want to make sure everyone knows how we define project performance. So project performance, we have defined as the mean of the business goals met for any project that are reported by the individuals. So if a project was supposed to do 10 things and say it did 10 out of 10, 100% of the business goals have been met. If it did say 7 out of 10, well, 70% of the business goals have been met. And the higher your business goals met ratio, the higher your project performance, essentially. And the average project performance throughout this study was 73.4%. So almost 7 out of 10 business goals were met for everybody. We want to make sure you know that before we share any findings ahead. Okay, so we are going to talk about approaches, right? That's what the first part of the findings was going to be about. And well, what we see on the screen is a charting of what kind of approaches are being adopted right now. We see that hybrid project management has been gaining ground over the last few years. Since Pulse of the Profession is a survey that happens every year, a lot of the findings we can chart back even 10 years, 15 years. So for this, we have charted it back 4 years since COVID, because COVID was a landmark for a lot of things to change. And we can see that predictive has been falling gradually and hybrid has been increasing gradually. So from a 20% to a 31.5%, that's a 10% rise in what is 3 years essentially, which is a great jump for any project management methodology to get reported on such a wide number of professionals globally. So you can see that hybrid project management has been gaining ground as fit for purpose, and organizations are learning to let go of rigid predictive methodologies and get more and more okay with providing pockets to agile practices, with providing pockets to other ways of operating. We're going to double down on that though. We want to double click and see what we mean by hybrid. What does it mean that organizations are giving more space to agile practices? What does that look like? So this is what we have. There are 4 ways we study this. And before I detail what is on the page, I want to highlight that what you see here is an India breakdown of the number. So since we are a global team, we do not publish any regional numbers in our reports. If you see a regional number, you will see it for all regions or for no region at all. And all the data that you have here that I have shared on the previous slide as well, they're global numbers. So they're global averages. But of course, things can vary in each region. And since I have access to the data, like I mentioned, I have taken some time to do a deep dive into it and get you some India-specific numbers. So you have more context into what is happening in your country with the same comparison to global numbers. So what we see here is there are 4 ways that hybrid happens. First is a chiefly agile approach with some elements of predictive. Second is a chiefly predictive approach with some elements of agile. Third is a combination of agile and predictive in a serial manner, right? So it's kind of one after another. For some parts of the project, you're using you're using predictive. Some parts of the project, you're providing agile pockets to kind of work with. And the last one is a very typical software kind of a situation where you have an agile development with a predictive rollout. So of these 4 ways that hybrid looks, you see globally that chiefly predictive with agile is the one that is the most common. And the second one is combination of agile and predictive. But in India, it looks slightly different. We see that more number of people are using chiefly agile and less number of people are using chiefly predictive. Overall, this doesn't really mean much of a difference. It just means that people are more leaning towards using agile approaches, which is, well, we don't know if it's good or bad. We just know it's a fact right now. We'll find out if it matters or not eventually.
Rupal, sorry to interrupt. Quick question here. So in the previous slide, when you were showing, you did mention that the number of people who are opting for a hybrid model is going up while predictive model is going down. But then the number of people who are opting for agile model is also going down. So that means people are not rigid about the methodology. They are more flexible now, right?
Yeah. So when we see predictive as one end of the spectrum and agile as another end, it means it's completely predictive or completely agile, right? If agile is going down, that means people on the agile side are realizing they need some structure, which comes with incorporating some elements of predictive into it. So that is what you see in the first one here, which is they're chiefly agile, but they're including some elements of predictive to provide more structure to their projects. They are not 100% agile. They may be 90% agile, 75% agile.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
The other end of the spectrum is people who would have been 100% predictive are now incorporating some agile. So maybe they are 80% predictive now, 75% predictive, 90% predictive, which is the second element you see here.
Okay, got it. And then there's a question from Gaurav in the chat. Gaurav is asking, do we have any qualitative approaches for measuring project performance as part of this report? To him, the numbers are just indicative. That's what he thinks.
Yeah. So in terms of the qualitative approaches, we definitely do. Like I mentioned, we did 15 in-depth interview sessions with people to go through these findings. And a lot of them have shared their experiences. So if you go to the report Pulse of the Profession, we have at least 4 deep dives into how different people have talked about using hybrid. Including like the one that comes to my mind was this person from Latin America, Brazil. I cannot remember his name, but he mentioned something like, oh, we are, we're agile on the inside and predictive on the outside, right? That was his qualitative summary of how he looks at hybrid. And there are a lot of other experiences we have shared. So please feel free to deep dive into the report and you will see not only experiences from other project professionals in there, but also a deeper explanation for what the spectrum means. There is a chart that we have in there, which explains, which puts all of these 4 figures on the paradigm and explains where you are and where you could be and what essentially all these things really mean on a more everyday functional level for you. Does that help?
It does. And where can they get that report? Does that get sent via PMI, via emails, or it's there on the website? If you could elaborate that
It is both. It does get in the newsletter as well. It gets sent via PMI as well. And it is available on the website. We do have a link we will share at the end of the presentation as well. But you could just Google Pulse of the Profession PMI or just Pulse of the Profession and you will get a link to the latest report.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I just wanted this to be clear so that people know where to find this information. Thank you, Rupal.
Amazing. No worries at all. So we want to take a little bit of a time to dive and double click, maybe 2 minutes, just double click into what these hybrid and agile approaches mean. Like I said, agile is increasing and some ways agile is being used and hybrid is being used in some parts of the project somewhere, right? Which is why these numbers are what they are on the screen. So in the next slide, what you see here is what tasks are people using agile approaches for. And what we see globally is team management, communication, and stakeholder management and planning are what hybrid and agile approaches are being used for. Whereas in India, you see that risk identification and monitoring also make it to the top 3, which is interesting because globally they don't. Risk monitoring is not risk identification and management is not what you think of when you think of, oh, I want to go agile, right? You think of software development. But this is something interesting that we find. Again, we don't know if this is good or bad or it matters or not. We'll know eventually. But essentially, this is good to have information for everyone who wants to see where agile approaches are being incorporated. If you're moving from predictive to, say, agile, what areas of the project are people incorporating that agile in, right? Which pocket is it? So this is what that slide tells us. But now we're going to see if any of this impacts project performance or not. Does anyone want to take a stab at answering in the chat box if you think the approach is important enough? Does anyone want to kind of say a yes or a no? How about we take a minute to do that? Okay, we have Gaurav saying no. Anyone
I don't
else?
think they want to take a stab because they know that you are an expert. So they would rather hear it from the horse's mouth than
Oh, well.
taking a wild guess.
So the wild guess is right. It does not matter what approach you use. What matters is that the approach you select for your project is suited for your project, right? It doesn't mean there is one right approach. It doesn't mean agile is the best, predictive is the best, hybrid is the best. It doesn't mean any of that. What it means is that you need to find the right approach for your project. So what you see on the screen is project performance numbers for all three approaches. And what you see is less than 1% differential in all of them, which means the differential doesn't really matter at all. It is not significant enough for us to note anything. So, and what you can also note is that the, for project performance for all of them is above average, close to average, however you want to look at it, right? 73.4% is the average and 75.4 is just a 2-point differential, which is again not significant enough. So what you're saying is you're getting average performance or mostly average performance, regardless of which approach you use. An approach cannot be isolated to say this is superior or this is inferior, which is a good thing for all of us because it indicates then that when a project management approach is selected by a team or an organization, everyone is more or less mature on it, right? Everyone is achieving the average. Everyone is being able to make it past the 74 and they're being able to figure out what approach they need and what approach they don't need, right? So this, what it tells us is the key finding for me here would be there is no one best approach. Whatever you use, if it is right for your project, it's going to get you to the average mark, right? So that is the key insight for us here, that all project professionals must take the time to tailor and align the approach to their project, to their unique environment, to their organization, to the needs of the industry they're operating in, to the needs of the organizational culture they're operating in, to what challenges they're going to expect, and then decide the approach instead of saying that this is the one best approach and we're going to use it regardless of whatever, right? So that's finding number one. Now we're going to dive into finding number two, which is the other controversial one, which is your work location. So we have had these wave of people being called back to the offices. The other extreme of people who are like, no, you call us back, we're going to resign, all of that, blah, 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 right? So all of that has happened in the last couple of years. And we want to look into if work location really matters in terms of your project performance. Before I dive into this, I want to take a moment to point out that PMI is globally remote. So we do not have an office to go to. We only have a space where people conduct meetings in. And that said, we meet a lot. PMI makes sure all the people they work with meet with each other a lot. We have offsites, we have team meetings that happen, across weeks. But essentially, we are a globally remote organization, which is why we're able to kind of function regardless of which region we are actually based out of. But that does not really shadow our findings in any way because our findings are based in data. So we're going to find out, just like we did with project management approaches, we're going to find out what the breakdown for remote versus in-office looks like. Here is what we have. What does work from anywhere really look like? So when in 2021, we did a study with PwC, we found out that 89% of people at that time were working remotely, which is an expected number, right? It's still second wave. It's still the time where people are kind of, stuck at their houses. So 89% of the project professionals in the Pulse were working remotely. When we did the same study in 2023, we found out that the number has already dropped by almost 30% to 61%. And this is a global number. So what you see is that, sure, remote work is extremely popular right now because I want to note that pre-COVID, 1 in 10 people would be working remotely. And that is not a hypothetical number. That is a McKinsey number, which says that only 10% of the people pre-COVID were working in some way, shape, or form remotely. Whereas what you see post-COVID is a number of 61%. For India, what does this look like? It looks like 46% of the people working in person. It looks like 43% of the people working remote and 11% of the people working remotely. I also want to point out that our data, as well as data from other organizations, has revealed that almost 4 out of 5 people who have worked in flexible environments never want to go back to office full time. They don't want to go back from 0 days in office to 5 days in office. They just don't, right? But at the same time, we want to dive into what the actual numbers are. So taking a double click on this, on the India number, we have this here. What we see is 45.9% of the professionals we surveyed working 5 or more days in office. What you see are the other numbers, which is 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. I believe 3 days a week is the most popular one. 18.3% of the people in the hybrid. So this 1 to 4 days is what qualifies for hybrid. 5 and above is what qualifies for in-person here. So the hybrid 43% you see breaks down into 1, 2, 3, and 4 days in office.
Can you go back to the previous slide, Rupal? Just a second. Yeah, so that means the remote numbers that we have right now, it's only 11% currently.
Yeah.
So people are either working in person as in full time or in the hybrid environment. There are lesser number of people currently, or this is pre-COVID?
This is current. This is 2023
number. 2023. Yeah. And if we talk about 2024, this numbers even the number of people working remotely would even I would say reduce. Might even reduce. Now people have started calling most of the workforce back to offices.
Yeah.
So it might reduce further. Okay,
yeah.
That's a good insight that almost 90% of the workforce is back in office, either working full-time or working in a hybrid environment. It's just only almost 10% of people who are working completely remotely now, which is equivalent to pre-COVID population. But now then it's combination of hybrid and in-person.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, it would have been no hybrid, right? It would have been virtually no hybrid. It would be remote or in office. Right. Very few people had some flexibility. So the number was 7% or 6% or something, right? So hybrid has expanded. People have been given more flexibility, but it's still at 43% that are hybrid. And when I look at hybrid and I break it down into 3 days in office, 4 days in office, I would consider personally, I would say 4 days in office is still working in person. 3 days in office is still quite a lot.
Yeah.
But the remote percentage is either never or 1 day or more, 1 day a month or less is what comprises of remote. So if you're going into the office 1 day a month, you're virtually remote, right? We're going to come with remote. But this is what the number looks like. And we're going to see if this matters for project performance or not. But before we do that, here is the deep dive. Another element I want to share with everyone is what people think the effectiveness of remote work is like. So like you mentioned, effectiveness matters a lot. And there is a gap. And why is this gap? And, how can we change this? So what you see on the screen are global numbers, but it's about how project managers versus senior leaders perceive effectiveness of remote. So what you see is that project professionals are, I would say senior leaders are more likely to underestimate how effective remote work is and overestimate how effective in-person work is by a huge margin. So that is what you see in figure 9 here, that senior leaders, only 25% of them say that, project remote work is effective. And close to 35% of them say you have to, be in person for it to be effective. Remote work is less effective, right? Whereas project professionals feel differently. The purple bar you see on the screen, they feel completely differently. So there is a lag in how project professionals feel about this versus senior leaders feel about this. And that is where a little bit of our problem is. Because what is happening is that senior leaders then become the ones who are making a decision about how a team should work. Because they feel they have something called what Microsoft calls a productivity paranoia. There's a Microsoft study on this, which has been linked in our study as well, but you can find it online if you want, which says that senior leaders are suffering from productivity paranoia, where they feel unless they can visibly see people, people are not productive. So, that's the problem that we have. And more so in India, I'm sure a lot of people on the call right now are going like, oh, this makes so much sense. But essentially, what this paranoia has led to is that senior leaders want to be the ones deciding how a team works. And according to our data, that is the worst thing you can do. Because project performance not only goes well below average, it is the worst when senior leaders are the ones deciding ways of working independently. I want to stress on the word independently because, of course, senior leaders are going to be involved in the process. But if they are independently making a decision and saying this is how the team will work, that is where project performance drops. So what should senior leaders do instead? Well, decisions about your work location should not be made by them independently. They should be made either in active consultation with project professionals, or it should be made by an independent PMO, which takes care of how these decisions happen across the organization. Because a PMO is going to, talk to a lot of people. They're gonna take a lot of things into consideration, the needs of the organization, the needs of the project, everything. It's not a one person, one impulse decision. So that is where you're going to see that project performance is going to be average if a PMO makes the decision, right? If it's made in combination with senior leaders and project professionals. But if only but if only senior leaders make the decision, that's where you're going to have a project performance drop massively from the average. Another thing I want to highlight is that it could also be because senior leaders themselves might not be equipped to lead remote teams. This is coming from a McKinsey study, which again has been linked in our research. But the McKinsey study in 2023 found that only 40% of leaders are comfortable enough to lead remote teams. They themselves don't feel prepared enough to lead remote teams, which could be leading to them asking you to come to office in person. Okay. Like I mentioned with PM approaches, we have a deep dive of qualitative data here in the report. We have shared experiences from multiple project professionals in what different locations they are working from, how their organizations are dealing with this. What does hybrid location look like for them? For their teams, you have teams who are coming into office 2 days a week, sorry. You have teams who have certain roles that are completely remote, whereas other roles which are completely in office. There are a lot of different ways organizations are doing this. And if you want to look at that data, it is present in the report. Interviews are present in the report. Please go and do a deep dive for yourself. Going back to project performance, does your location matter at all when it comes to project performance? Well, drum roll, just like your approach doesn't, your location doesn't independently matter with respect to your project performance. What you see here on screen are 74%, 74.6%, 75.4%, which are virtually the same number. And they're extremely close to your 73.4% of average. So we would not conclude at all that remote work or hybrid work or in-person work is going to give you any edge when it comes to your project performance. What is going to give you an edge is you choose the right method for your team. You choose the right method for your project. You have to look at what the needs, challenges of your team are, of your project are, and then you have to decide how you want to approach the location of this particular project, which is what a PMO would do. But taking a moment here and now looking at, say, PM approaches don't matter. work locations are not really going to give you the answer you want, then what is? Well, the answer to boosting your project performance is, if you want to invest somewhere as an organization, you want to invest in key enablers, or what we call key enablers of great project performance. What are these enablers and why are they important? Well, the first reason they are important is because they drive project performance. And how we know that is what you see on the screen, that if you have 0 enablers, you're not providing any of these enablers to your people, you have a 68.4 project performance, which is close to 5.5% less than the average. And the average is 73.8, right? So if you have 0 enablers, you are already disadvantaged. So if you provide 1 or 2 enablers, does anything change? Well, yes, a little bit, maybe 2% changes, but not enough to make a significant bump in project performance, and you're still below average. What does make a bump is if you provide 3 enablers or more. So if you provide 3 and you keep adding them, the number keeps increasing when it comes to project performance, right? If you are able to provide 3 enablers, you're looking at 76.7% in project performance easily. I also want to look at, it's not just project performance, but other factors that get impacted by these enablers. The first factor is scope creep.
Sorry to interrupt, Rupal. So if
Yeah.
you could go back and then explain, as in give few references of these enablers to our learners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was hoping to do a deep dive into it in the 3rd slide, but some of the enablers that people are being offered are things like coaching, mentoring, training on new ways of working, communities of practice, mental health resources. Those are the kind of enablers that make a difference. And what you see here is 73.8, where my cursor is, I think you can see it. That is your average performance rate. 68.4 is your 0 enablers. 70.9 is when you offer 1 to 2 enablers. And 76.7 is when you offer 3 enablers. And if you add a 4th enabler, this goes up further.
All right. Thank you so much. This is helpful.
All right. Second thing that enablers impact is things like scope creep and budget loss. So scope creep is a beast all of us are very, very friendly with. You start a project and suddenly you're doing something so much more than what your average scope was, right? If you have enablers in your organization, if you offer more than 3 enablers, well, guess what? You are 11% better equipped to deal with scope creep. You're going to see less scope creep by almost 11%. If you look at budget loss, let's say everything has gone wrong, your project has failed, blah, 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 everything has gone to disaster, you couldn't help with your project performance regardless of what you offer, right? There is still a silver lining. If your project failed, everything went to doom, but you had enablers, you are 6% less likely to lose budget. You're still going to be able to save money even if the project failed. So those are some things you should keep in mind when it comes to enablers, that it's not just project performance that gets impacted, it's other supporting factors like budget loss and scope creep that also get very, very impacted by these enablers. Now, what are the enablers? Well, some of the key enablers offered are on the screen, but they differ according to the organization you are in. You have employee resource groups, mental health resources, coaching and mentorship that are very important for industries like construction. Whereas, say, in manufacturing, you have a dedicated communication channel that becomes a more important key enabler. In telecom, if you see, when you offer these, enablers like training on resilience, on mental health resources, dedicated communication channels, your project performance jumps as high as 83.9%, by the way. So, if you look at government, if you have something as training on resilience in government, just training on resilience can raise your project performance to 80.2%. Just employee resource groups can raise your project performance to 81.2%. So all of these things take your project performance way above average. But there is no one size fits all. Again, like it was with PM approaches, like it was with location, there is no one size fits all. You have to find what the right enablers for your organization are, what your people need, which is why a PMO or an organization like a PMO in your org becomes important, because you want someone whose job it is to communicate with your team and figure out what the needs are. Also, we have done a deep dive on what these enablers look like for different organizations around the globe. And that deep dive is also present in the report. So if you want to see what different organizations are offering and how they're offering it, including those in India, we have, I think, one from India in this shortlist here. We spoke to 2 organizations in India in depth, but at least one has been listed in the interviews for the enablers. You can go look at it, see what they're doing, get some ideas from what people in other regions are doing as well. I'm going to double tap and see what this in India looks like, by the way. So in terms of key enablers, training and coaching are already being offered by close to 50% or more respondents in India, which is something we're all familiar with, right? Training happens for all of us. Coaching is something, mentoring is something we seek out, even if it's not provided by the organization. So for India, I would say the main thing they can work on is things like employee resource groups, is things like support for managing mental health, right? Is things like actually like having resilience training or change training, making sure everyone is aware of dedicated communication channels. Those are some of the areas to work at. And I also want to take a moment to note here that when we looked at the global numbers, 50 to 55% was the max anyone was providing in terms of training reported, right? The global numbers kind of stand at 48%, 47%, 39%, 38%. So India is better at providing trainings than providing enablers than globally, but there is still a long way to go. If say 5 out of 10 organizations are doing it, 6 out of 10 organizations are doing it, there are still 4 that need to catch up on the most basic stuff like trainings and coachings. On stuff like mental health resources, employee resource groups, 70% or above have to catch up. So we want to make a note that there's a lot of scope for better training and resources. I know I'm also mindful of the time. We have about 11 minutes left. So I want to wrap this up soon and just share that what resources you provide have to be according to the needs of your team. But they are incredibly important to dealing with the complexities of the project environment today, dealing with unpredictability of the internal and external forces, enhancing the power skills of your employees. All of that is what you need to focus on. And that is what is going to give you the boost you need in project performance. Just a recap of the 3 findings. PM approaches are important, but they are not enough. So choosing the right PM approach is table stakes. You have to make sure you choose the right one. Otherwise, you're going to see a drop from average project performance. Work locations are again the same. Doesn't matter what you do. If you're remote, you're in person, you're hybrid, it is not solely going to define your project performance. You have to choose the approach that is right for your people and for your project. What is going to contribute to your project performance is key success enablers like training, resources, ERGs, communities of practice, mental health resources. These are the things organizations can really focus on. And these are the critical enablers which are going to make teams empowered to provide them what they need to achieve the kind of project success you want or your organization wants. Some of the findings from Pulse that I've shared are mostly just a recap. I want to make sure everyone takes some time to go through the report and look at the deep dive themselves. I also want to take a minute to point out what other research pieces we have out already that are going to be helpful for everyone. The first one is that we have another Pulse coming up this year, which is going to focus on business acumen. So that will be Pulse of the Profession 2025. It's going to be based on 2024 data. The survey is already out floating. We have a lot of content on AI and generative AI in particular. PMI has a generative AI hub. If you're already aware, great. If you're not, we have 2 courses. We have a lot of AI research we are doing. We just put out a prompt engineering report about 2 weeks ago, I believe, on what prompt engineering for project professionals is and what you really need to learn. I am personally hosting a webinar for PMI on that on Tuesday. If you want to attend, we would love to have you there. You can find the details on the webinar on projectmanagement.com. We're expecting about a few hundred people globally, but we're going to do a deep dive into what prompt engineering is, how you can use it in project management, and how you can use AI in project management. We also have Mega Trends 2024, which is upcoming. It's going to be out in a couple of weeks, but it's going to detail what are the main things impacting project management. We have research on org agility and PMOs that's going to be upcoming in the next few months. So if you have any questions about any of what I shared right now or anything that I have shared in terms of upcoming projects, please feel free to write an email to me. I am at rupal.bhandari@pmi.org. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to everyone. And I'm going to take a minute to pause finally after 45 minutes of blabbering and see if anyone has questions that we can answer right now.
Well, what an energy, Rupal. I mean, it's always lovely to hear from you because not just you bring the insights from PMI International, you bring them in such a manner that we always get enlightened, and then you always charm us with the way you share those insights with us. So thank you so much for sharing. Guys, any questions? So I see Gaurav has posted few questions. I guess few of them got answered, but let me reiterate them. So Gaurav wanted to ask that if you think the culture of the organization is also an attributing factor for this distrust among senior leaders. Culture eats strategy, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah, indeed it does. But culture is something more qualitative, right? We have culture amongst the key drivers of project performance, but there is no one way to nail culture down. It's going to look different for everyone, just like open mindset is going to look different for everyone. Sure, our numbers say that virtually everyone says culture is important, like 95%, 97% of people say it's important. But what does that mean is going to be different for everyone. So we can't really double click on it so far.
Understood. Thank you so much. And then will the industry, say, for example, construction of manufacturing industry, not get impacted due to location? As in,
right. So we said it depends on the project, right? Like, sure, construction, you need people to be in person. It can't be industry agnostic, which is why the right location for a construction project would be in person in most cases. Or the right location for a manufacturing project could be in person for most cases. At the same time, you have a lot of organizations which are basing their engineers remote in terms of manufacturing, right? You have all the product designers, engineers, everyone who doesn't really need to work on the rig is remote. So you're still in a hybrid setup.
Right, right. Good to know that, Rupal. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Any other questions, guys? Or we're good to wrap this up?
I do want to point out an answer to someone who shared a question about, actually, Gaurav made a comment about how India numbers could be due to population.
Yeah.
Not in the study, all the data is weighted. So the population of the study, the population of a country is already set into the weighting criteria. And it doesn't really matter what the population of the country is. Everyone is going to get the same weightage in terms of the percentage.
Right. I was aware of that because I know PMI and other, in fact, all the organizations who do such kind of surveys are mindful of this fact that if they are doing any kind of survey, they do give weightage to the population and other factors, and then accordingly they bring the insights accordingly.
Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that air. Can pharma industry have remote PMs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, AstraZeneca made the virus practically remotely, right? So pharma can have, yeah. You want to deep dive on that? We have that as well. There's a study we did with AstraZeneca, I think last year, one of my colleagues did it, but they do a deep dive of the practices that pharma industry follows in terms of work location. And there are many other resources available on healthcare on the projectmanagement.com research that we put out. A lot of my colleagues work on that.
So basically, I think it's good because see, we got a lot of insights from this session, and it's a shame that a lot of people could not join maybe Sunday morning because there was a festival also yesterday in a lot of locations, so people did not join. But frankly speaking, this was a very, very insightful session, Rupal, and the people who have joined have been posting that on comments as well, that they really got benefited out of it. And yes, we will be in touch with you for future sessions as well. And yeah, because your sessions are always insightful, and then we get to know a lot of things which are, I would say, industry trends and other things, and then a lot of insights that come out and which are very, very relevant. And then we take those learnings forwards and insights forward, and then share with our respective organization leads so that they can make, use them as best practices within the respective organizations. So thank you so much for taking out time. And yes, I'm sharing the PDU code. Just give me a second. Amit was quick to ask that. I'm sharing it right away. You guys can see my screen, right? So here's the PDU information. You need to go to PMI CCRS dashboard, report, click on report PDUs, and click on course of training. Course provider would be PMI North India chapter, course name Learning by 4.0, breaking free from Office Centric Models, PMI Research, and the PDU claim ID is C118VP6137. And the course started and end date would be April 14th, 2024. And in case you face any challenges, you can reach out to me or Vikas Madan, and you'll get one PDU for attending this session under Ways of Working. In case you want to take screenshots, please do that. I'm repeating the PDU claim ID. This is C118VP6137. All right, with that, thank you again, Rupal. This was very, very insightful session. And yeah, I can type in the PDU code in the chat as well. Just give me a second.
It is always amazing to have sessions with you and the North India chapter, Deepti.
Thank you so much. I am very glad to know that. And yes, I will definitely be in touch with you for future sessions. In fact, Vikas and I were talking that when, as in we were talking about the new research that is about to get posted. So maybe a few months down the line, we'll have a session on that, because that's also a very, very interesting topic. I don't want to talk about that right now. Yes. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a lovely day, and we will let you know about the next session that we host. We'll be doing that very soon, most probably early next month, and we'll be sharing the details with you. So thank you again, Rupal, and thank you everyone for joining in. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.